I'm Pastor Mike, and I want to welcome you to Bedtime Storybook Hour, I believe it's called, and uh, it's about 7:30, and this is about the time maybe you get ready for bed, and maybe like me, you like a good story before you go to bed. And so myself and some others are going to be telling this great and wonderful story to you. We're going to be telling the same story, actually reading it to you, and Jesus always told stories, and he was a master storyteller, and he told stories about farmers and seeds and all kinds of things. And so, because we're in West Virginia, and our church, Union Chapel, is in West Virginia, and we are surrounded by forest and animals, I'm going to tell you a story about an animal, actually a lot of animals, and they all have names, just like you have a name. And you're going to get to know them, but the most important animal that you're going to get to know is, guess what kind of animal? It's a squirrel. Do you like squirrels? You know, there's different kinds of squirrels. There's a gray squirrel, and there's something called a fox squirrel. But our story is about a red squirrel. How about that? I like squirrels, especially red squirrels. And this squirrel's name is Chatterer. Now, can you say chatter? And then you go on the end, and it's Chatterer. Because, well, squirrels chatter a lot. I think I can even make some squirrel noises. Here's some squirrel noises. See if you can make them too. Here you go. See, that's the noise of a squirrel. So a long time ago, a man by the name of Thornton Burgess, who loved to write books about animals and natures, told a story, here it is, called The Adventures of Chatterer the Red Squirrel. And that's what the cover of the book looked like. And this book was written, are you ready for this? Over 100 years ago. It was written in 1915, before any of us were born. That makes it over 100 years old, but it's still a wonderful story. Just like the Bible was written a long time ago, and it still has meaning, great meaning for our life today. Here's another cover of the same book, The Adventures of Chatterer the Red Squirrel. I can't wait to read this story to you. The story is about this red squirrel that doesn't always make the best decisions, and we don't always make the best decisions, but he learns from them. And I think we even learn some truths that we find in the Bible in these. The story that I'm going to read you tonight about Chatterer is Chatterer gets in trouble. He gets in a really tough spot because he's making fun of one of the other animals in the forest. I'll just read you the story. So get comfortable. Get a blanket, a pillow, maybe some milk and some cookies, and let me read to you some of the story of the adventures of Chatterer the Red Squirrel. Here we go. Chatterer the Red Squirrel had been scolding because there was no excitement. He had even tried to make some excitement by waking Bobby Coon and making him so angry that Bobby had threatened to eat Chatter alive. It had been great fun to dance around and call Bobby names and make fun of him. Oh yes, it had been great fun. You see, Chatterer knew all the time that Bobby couldn't catch him even if he tried. But now things were different. Chatterer had all the excitement that he wanted. Indeed, he had more than he wanted. The truth is, Chatterer was running for his life, and he knew it. It's a terrible thing. A very terrible thing to have to run for one's life. Peter Rabbit knows all about it. He has to run for his life often. Sometimes It has been Reddy Fox behind him, sometimes Bowser the Hound, and once or twice Old Man Coyote. Peter has known that on his long legs his life has depended. And more than once, a terrible fear has filled his heart. But Peter has also known that if he could reach the old stone wall or the dear old briar patch first, that he would be safe. And he always reached it. So when he has been running with that terrible fear in his heart, there has always been hope there too. But Chatterer the red squirrel was running without hope. Yes, sir. There was nothing but fear, terrible fear, in Chatterer's heart, for he knew not where to go. The old hollow tree or the holes in the old stone wall where he would be safe from anyone else, even Farmer Brown's boy, well, it offered him no safety now. For the one who was following him with hunger in his anger, red eyes, could go anywhere that he could go into any hole big enough for him to squeeze into. You see, it was Shadow the Weasel from whom Chatterer was running. And Shadow is so slim that he can slip in and out of places even that Chatterer cannot get through. Chatterer knew all this. And so, because it was of no use to run to his usual safe hiding places, he ran in just the other direction. He didn't know where he was going. He had just one thought: to run as long as he could, and then, well, he would try to fight, though he knew it would be of no use. Oh dear, he sobbed as he ran out on the branch of a tree and leaped across to the next tree. I wish I had minded my business. I wish I'd kept my tongue still. Shadow the Weasel wouldn't have known where I was if he hadn't heard my voice. Oh dear, what can I do? What can I do? Now in his great fright, Chatterer had run and jumped so hard that he was beginning to grow weary and tired. Presently, he found that he must make a very long jump to reach the next tree. He had often made as long a jump as this and thought nothing of it, but now he was so tired that the distance looked twice as great as it really was. He didn't dare to stop to run down the tree and scamper across, so he took a long breath. He ran swiftly along the branch and he leaped. His hands just touched the tip of the nearest branch of the other tree, and he tried his very best to hold on, but he couldn't. Then down he fell. He spread himself out as flat as he could, and that saved him a little, but still it was a dreadful fall. And when he landed, it seemed for just a minute as if all the breath had gone from his body. But it wasn't quite. And in just another minute, he was scrambling up the tree. Chapter 2. Chatterer, still running for his life and without the least hope, suddenly saw a last chance to escape from Shadow the Weasel. That is, he saw something that might offer him a chance. He couldn't be sure until he had tried, and even then he might escape from one danger, only to run right into another danger equally as great. And what Chatterer saw was a big brown bunch near the top of a tall chestnut tree, and so he headed for that tree as fast as he could ever go. What was that big brown bunch? Why, it was Redtail the hawk, who was dozing there with his head drawn down between his shoulders, dreaming. Now, old Redtail is one of Chatterer's deadliest enemies. He is quite fond of Red Squirrel, as is Shadow the Weasel, though he doesn't often try to catch one, because there are other things to eat that are much easier to get than a red squirrel. Chatterer had more than one narrow escape from old Redtail and was very much afraid of him, yet here he was running up the tree in which Redtail was sitting. You see, a very daring idea had come into his head. He had seen at once that Redtail was dozing, and he had not seen Chatterer at all. He knew that Redtail would just as soon have Shadow the Weasel for dinner as he would himself. And a very daring plan had popped into his head. I may as well be caught by Redtail as Shadow, Chatterer thought as he ran up the tree. But if my plan works out right, I won't be caught by either. Anyway, it is my very last chance. So up the tree he scrambled, and after him went Shadow the Weasel. Shadow had been so intent on catching Chatterer that he had not noticed old Redtail, which was just as Chatterer had hoped. Up he scrambled straight past old Redtail, but as he passed him, he pulled one of Redtail's long tail feathers, and then he ran to the top of the tree, and with the last bit of strength he had left, he leaped into another tree, a spruce tree, where, hidden by the thick branches, he stopped to rest, to see what would happen. Of course, when he felt his tail pulled, old Redtail was wide awake in a flash. And of course he looked down to see who had dared to pull his tail. And there, just below him, was Shadow the Weasel, who had just that minute discovered who was sitting there. Old Redtail hissed sharply, and the feathers on top of his head stood up in a way they do when he is angry. And he was angry, very angry. Shadow the Weasel stopped short. And then, like a flash, he dodged around to the other side of the tree. He had no thought of Chatterer now. Things were changed all in an instant. They had quite changed. Instead of the hunter, now he was the hunted. Old Redtail circled in the air just overhead, and every time he caught sight of Shadow the Weasel, he swooped at him with great cruel claws spread out to clutch him. Shadow dodged around the trunk of the tree. He was more angry now than frightened, for his sharp eyes had spied a little hollow in a branch of the chestnut tree, and he knew that once inside of that he would have nothing to fear. But he was angry clear through to think that he should be cheated out of that dinner he had been so sure of only a few minutes before. So he screeched angrily at old Redtail, and then, watching for his chance, he scampered out to the hollow and whisked inside just in a nick of time. Chatterer, watching from the spruce tree, gave a great sigh of relief. He saw old Redtail the hawk post himself on the top of a tall tree where he could keep watch of that hollow in which Shadow had disappeared, and he knew that it would be a long time before Shadow would dare poke even his nose outside. Then, as soon as Chatterer was rested, he stole softly, oh, so softly, away through the treetops until he was sure that Redtail could not see him anymore. And then he hurried. He wanted to get just as far away from Shadow the Weasel as he could. Next week, we get to hear even more about Chatterer, the red squirrel, and his forest friends, and all of the lessons that Chatterer learns, just like we do. God bless you. We miss you. You're special, and good night.